Hi, this is Philip Roberts, and this is my vlog for Game Design as Cultural Practice. And this is my vlog for Fate of the World. As this is one of the first simulators in the God game subgenre, as sometimes it's called, the visual design and interface here is a little bit different. Visually, you have a broad overview of the entire world and several menus and various icons, indicators, and charts and other points of information that let you know what's going on. In this game in particular, I did find it all to be a lot. There's quite a lot of information being thrown at you, and that can be a little bit confusing. And this might be personal preference, but I would have preferred everything would have been a little bit more, I guess, toned down, as all the menus and bars and bezels are very shiny and distracting. This being a more cerebral game, I would consider that a minus. Moving past that though, there are various little portraits and stylings done to the various nations of the globe to give just a small bit of, I guess, cultural flair styling, but that's more aesthetic. The game's sonic design was kind of very dark and, I wouldn't say bombastic, but very large in a sense. It should be pretty clear from the title as well as subject material, in this case global warming and economic development and how those fight against each other, that this game takes itself very seriously, and I think the sound reinforces that. Almost to the point though that I was just a little bit stressed out trying to play the game, but that also could have just been some of my general confusion while doing so. As far as the interaction design, so you have this broad overview of the map where you can assign various advisors to each region. These advisors give you slots that you can play cards in that will allow you to accomplish different effects. The cards might be different technologies, buildings, or policies that you implement, and what these do is they have different effects on the Human Development Index in that region, the economic growth, civil unrest, and mitigating the effects of climate change, such as droughts and other natural disasters, as well as managing pollution and industry, such as oil and coal. As you can imagine, all of these are interrelated, and modifying one thing may add or subtract to different effects in other areas. It's a very fine balancing act. The narrative design of this game is somewhat more removed compared to the others. At the start of every game, you have the option of watching a cutscene that kind of gives you some information about what's going on. Essentially, it's a representation of our world in a couple of years, where climate change starts to cause various disasters and forms of human suffering. You, as a leader of the Global Environment Organization, are tasked with going around the world and solving this crisis. Beyond this briefing at the beginning, some of the only ways you really are exposed to narrative are through these little news reports that happen after every turn is played. These little news reports will let you know what's happening in the region and help clue you in on what you need to focus on as for your policies. Referencing some of the mechanics and how those work with the narrative and interactions, this is a PC game where you're primarily using your mouse to click on different objects and icons and buttons. This plays very similarly to traditional board games in which you have turns. In this case, a turn represents 5 years of game world time that progress every time you click a button, and various effects happen based upon the cards that you had chosen for that turn. For the sake of variety, there's a couple of different fail states and objectives based upon the options that you chose at the beginning in the main menu. Usually after a period of time has passed, you'll either fail your objective or you'll reach your goals, sometimes with extra bonus goals that you may have achieved. Skipping a little ahead because I need to talk about the tutorial mechanics here, there were a little lacking in my opinion. It kind of starts you off and then just drops you. You go at the very beginning and it tells you how to essentially do the very basic mechanical stuff of picking cards and advisors and regions, but it doesn't really tell you what the effects of any of this is, and because of that you're kind of left to discover things on your own. There's this whole sub-menu that you can explore: the HDI, health care, economic effects, and so on, as well as various other notifications and information, and I just wasn't able to really read that in a very easy way. For example, the HDI and economics menu kind of loops around in a very odd fashion when these probably should have just been separated into two different things, or at the very least one menu with two separate areas that interact independently of each other. And usually when I go through tutorials, I'm used to being handheld essentially to a win state, at the very least enough of it explained in such a way that I would be able to gather the pieces I need to win. However, the first 2 times I played, I failed pretty miserably because I just didn't really understand what was going on, or at least well enough at that point to win. Especially games with kind of economic systems, they tend to spiral either really well or really poorly out of control because oftentimes the early game effects are multiplicative and scaled exponentially, and I feel that's the case of what happened here. Which leads into another point in that I just kind of found the experience somewhat frustrating. I can't fault Fate of the World completely for this because this style of game is somewhat more difficult compared to others, and there's just a lot of information at the beginning you have to understand before you can really enjoy this. The Civilization style games kind of have this problem, but they're not insurmountable. I think comparing this game to some of our other readings and games such as Papers, Please, which showed more of kind of a regional, national level issue maybe, since Papers, Please was more focused on the events of the late 80s and the fall of the Soviet Union, with a couple of almost Yakov Smirnoff jokes thrown in for good measure. Fate of the World is definitely focused on, well, the world. I think it does reflect broadly pretty well some of the more regional issues, such as instability in certain regions. When I played a more global level game, I had difficulties with violence in the Middle East, corruption in second world nations, and then just political ineptitude and opposition to economic policies in first world nations. I think the Fate of the World overall is very fair in the way it presents its arguments, and it definitely lets you know there's a balancing act between economic development and the human piece, as well as the economic piece of fighting global warming. Unfortunately, though, I think Fate of the World may have unintentionally dated itself by establishing the events starting at 2020, which may be a little optimistic, give or take whatever the current political situation is in the world at that time.